The intersection of 5th and Main was a powder keg of frustration. The sound of screeching brakes, followed by the sickening crunch of metal, had brought the city's busiest afternoon to a dead stop. Within seconds, the drivers were out of their cars, faces flushed red, shouting words that hung heavy in the humid air. A crowd gathered, but they weren't there to help, they were there to film. Dozens of smartphones were raised like tiny mirrors, reflecting a scene of human anger. It felt like the entire street was one spark away from a riot. But then, a man in a simple grey cardigan stepped off the sidewalk. He didn't have a uniform, and he didn't raise his voice. He did something so quiet, so small, that the cameras almost missed it. But in 5 minutes, the shouting stopped. In 10 minutes, the phones were put away. And by the time the police arrived, the street didn't look like a crime scene, it looked like a community. To understand the power of what happened, you have to understand the mood of the people. In the US, UK, and Canada, we live in a world that is always on. Everyone is rushing, everyone is stressed, and everyone is one bad day away from breaking. There was Mr. Harrison, a businessman who had just lost a major contract. There was Sarah, a young mother whose toddler was crying in the back seat of the car behind the crash. The two drivers involved a young man in a delivery van and an older woman in a luxury SUV were trapped in a cycle of blame. You weren't looking. He yelled. You cut me off. She screamed back. The crowd was feeding the fire. People were heckling from the sidewalks. The heat of the pavement seemed to be radiating through everyone's skin. It was a spectacle of modern isolation, hundreds of people in one place, yet everyone was completely alone in their anger. The man in the grey cardigan didn't look like a hero. He looked like someone's grandfather. He didn't try to play judge. He didn't tell the drivers to be quiet. Instead, he walked over to a small flower stall on the corner that had been knocked over in the confusion. Bright yellow daisies and red roses were scattered across the wet pavement. While the driver screamed, the stranger knelt down. He began to carefully pick up the crushed flowers. He didn't hurry. He didn't look at the cameras. He just treated those broken stems with a strange, focused tenderness. One by one, the people filming began to lower their phones. The silence started with the people closest to him. There was something about his piece that made their anger feel loud, silly. Out of place, Mr. Harrison, the stressed businessman, was the first to move. He tucked his phone into his pocket, walked over, and without a word, started helping the stranger right the fallen buckets. Then Sarah, the young mother, stepped out of her car. She didn't join the fight. She handed a pack of wet wipes to the stranger to help clean the spilled soil. The stranger finally stood up. He walked over to the two drivers who were still shaking with rage. He didn't lecture them. He reached into his bag and pulled out 2 simple bottles of cold water. He handed one to the young delivery driver and one to the woman in the SUV. It's a very hot day, the stranger said. His voice was soft, but in the new silence of the street, it carried like a bell. It's hard to remember who we are when we're thirsty and afraid. Take a moment. The metal is just metal. But you two, you are neighbors. The young man took a sip of the water, and you could see the tension leave his shoulders. The woman in the SUV looked at the water, then at the stranger, and her eyes filled with tears. The monster she was. Fighting wasn't the delivery driver, it was her own stress. Suddenly, the spectacle was over. The two drivers, who moments ago looked ready to fight, were now standing together, speaking in low, respectful tones. They weren't insurance claims anymore. They were to people who had just had a very bad afternoon. By the time the sirens finally faded into the distance and the cars were towed away, the stranger was gone. He didn't leave his name. He didn't wait for a thank you or a viral video moment. But the street was different. Harrison went to his office and, instead of snapping at his assistant, he asked her how her family was doing. Sarah drove home and felt a little less alone in the world. We often think that to change the world, we need to solve the big problems. But the truth is, the world is changed by the people who choose to pick up a fallen flower or offer a bottle of water. When things get heated, you don't need a title to be a leader. You just need to remember that underneath the anger and the noise, everyone is just looking for a little bit of grace. Next time you see a fire starting in your life, don't bring more fuel. Be the person in the grey cardigan, because one small gesture doesn't just change a street, it reminds us how to be human again.